Greetings again, friends. Well, you may wonder if you looked at the thumbnail for this video, what is going on? Is it like the devil and the angel that as sometimes being pictured fighting against each other and influencing us as this has been represented? Well, I am trying to lead us up to what is coming. Now, there is coming the war of all wars. Now, the war of all wars is coming, and it's Armageddon. And there is conflict that happens, and I don't know if we'll end up with a couple videos on Armageddon, but I thought it would be important to start this time where we get into talking about this war when Jesus returns, the war of man versus God, if we first discuss why is there war? Well, you know, friend, we all want peace. We want to be at peace, but it seems like there's conflict everywhere. There's differing opinions. There's people getting angry with other people. I mean, you look at something that is often in the news, like has been in the news recently in the last month or so, all of the fighting that has existed between the Arab people or the Palestinian people as it's called and the Jewish people in Israel. And hopefully this treaty with Egypt helping is going to help something work for a temporary ceasefire because people are being killed there. They fired thousands of rockets, 4,000 or so, into Israel, just aiming for any civilian or whatever. Israel doesn't do that when they destroy Hamas and the terrorist organization there. But friend, I hope that you see. In America, I hope you watching this here understand that just last year, we were seeing peace deals happening in the Middle East because there was leadership in this country that was more toward that through strength that led to a difference of the stalemate that's been there for so long. There were decisions made, and it led to peace from different neighboring countries around Israel. But we know that Israel biblically is going to become a stumbling stone to the world. And in this current administration, we see it going right back to the way it's been for years because of the status quo, thinking that this is the way it should be. And now you've got the war going on that's been going on, that's killed Israelis and killed the different Palestinian people, but mostly those leaders of terrorists. But anyway, that's just an example I'm giving you, a modern current example that's been around since Abraham. We could talk about why this started in the first place. A lack of faith of Abraham, a failure of faith briefly led to this war that's been going on since. But what I wanted to do today is to just really help you to understand why there's war. And just as I'm preparing for this video, I'm thinking of an outline from the passage that really just came to my mind about this as I thought about how I would present this. So I just want you to look at this in reference to this great battle that's going to take place of Armageddon. And I know people are interested in that, and we're going to do at least one, if not two videos on Armageddon. But in Matthew 24, verse 6, Jesus said that you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. So there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, and that's part of life. That's part of particularly life as we come to the end of time, the end of this age, where there is more and more unsettled conflicts and warring before it leads to that ultimate battle or war that takes place when Jesus returns. So we should look at why is there war. Now, there's war, friend, really because it's good versus evil. It's something that's happened from the beginning. But there's a problem inside of us that makes us war. Now, this is why all through cultures in history, you see one nation conquering another. You see wars within nations, and people die and are killed, and countries rise and fall through wars, and one conquering another, and this constant battling and warring going on. And most of us probably don't want war. We want peace. And you can have peace personally. Friend, you can have peace if you know the Prince of Peace. If you know that He gave His life. He endured the warfare of evil against Him when He sacrificed Himself on the cross, when He paid for the sins of the world. Jesus Christ is the one who did that for you and for me. And anyone who believes in Him will not perish but have everlasting life. So if you believe He died for your sins, friend, you will be saved. It is simple belief. It's not doing anything. It is simply the work of belief or faith, as He said in John 6, and as I've talked about before. Now, the war that takes place, though, we are told in other scriptures about war, and the one that just popped in my mind and has been there since the morning that I have been thinking about this in more detail is James chapter 4. Now, in James chapter 4, we are told straight up why there is war. And I just came up with this quick outline that really is right from this passage that helps us to understand why there is war. Now, war happens because of pride and because of someone wanting their way over another person's way. All right, that's essentially what you could say is going on here, because it even comes to that in James chapter 4 in verse 6, where it says that He gives more grace. Therefore, He says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. All right, so we are, as verse 9 says, to lament and mourn and weep, and let our laughter be turned to mourning and joy to gloom. And verse 10 says, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. But we try to lift ourselves up. We fight. We sometimes have war within. Now, there have been books written, War and Peace. There have been all kinds of things written as to why there's war. But the Bible tells us flat out, straight up, why there's war. So look here in James 4 in verse 1. Now, it tells us here, as he posits the question, where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? Now I got to thinking about that. Okay, someone wants their way. They think they'll have more pleasure and satisfaction if they get their way. So they fight against someone else so that they can get their way and make someone else capitulate to them and the pleasures and desires that they have. So the first reason why there's war is right here in verse 1, where it says that when you have war, when you fight for pleasure. Okay, so that ought to tell us something. Now, we're told in Psalms that at his right hand there are pleasures forevermore. So we know that Jesus in John 10:10 said that the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy, but Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. God wants us to have joy and peace. He wants that to be true. And it can be for you if you know Him, even if war is going on around you. But friend, if you fight for pleasure, I mean, if you are just wanting that pleasure so much, lusting for it, then you are gonna have war. Because it's not going to be the same thing that other people want, or you'll fight over the same thing and who might be dominant in it. Now, we have Peter telling us in 1 Peter 2:11, Peter says, Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. It is the lust that we have, that fighting within for our own pleasure and satisfaction, that causes the wars within us, that it goes out and causes wars with other peoples and leads to wars between countries and people dying and being killed, as it's happened all through history. So that's one reason why you have war. Let's keep reading here in James 4, because verse 2 says, You lust and you do not have, you murder and covet and cannot obtain, you fight and war, yet you do not have, because you do not ask. Okay, now that gives us the second reason why there is war. The first reason was why do you have war? Because you fight for pleasure. The second reason you have war is because you fail to pray. Okay, so we see this here. It says, you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may consume it, that you may consume or spend it on your pleasures. Okay, so it works together personally, still involved with pleasure, and it is still, though, your focus on your own pleasures, to the extent that you don't consider God's will and what is best that He has for you. So when you fail to pray, you are gonna have war, because you're not gonna be yielded and submitted to God if you don't think, this ought to be a challenge to you, friend. If you don't have a good prayer life, it's because you think that you're okay and you don't need to pray. It's because you think that you've got it under control and you're just focused on your own pleasure. You're not yielded to Him. If you fail to pray, that might seem to be that you've got it under control, but that fighting within that fighting for pleasure is going to lead to war. So friend, understand, war comes from fighting for pleasure. It comes from failing to pray. And we read on and it says, even calling people out, it says in verse 4, adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Okay, so the third reason why you have war is friendship with the people. Because you want to be friendly with the people. And here I don't mean just any person, I'm talking about the collective opinion of the people that you hang with, that have their ideas, that are focused on their pleasures, the party mentality, the lifestyle that they lead, thinking that it's all about them and how they can feel and have a good old time when they're focused on their own pleasures. And when you have all that happening and people focused on their own pleasures, then and you're friends with that, you put yourself against God. Because he says that if you make yourself to be a friend of the world or a friend with the people, the ones that you want to hang with because of their ideas, they're not following God. You make yourself an enemy of God, as verse 4 says. So, there's a good outline for you just in the first 4 verses of James chapter 4 as to why you have war. And it starts personally as to why you have war. And again, it is because you have pride, and how you don't have war is when you humble yourself before God and you trust in Him and yield to Him. So if you want to have war, if you want to understand why there's war, well, there's war because you fight for pleasure. There's war because you fail to pray. And there's war because you're friendly with the people, the world. And so that's 3 reasons that you have right here from James chapter 4 as to why there's war. Now, because all of this is happening and because we're leading up to that great war, that battle that exists, that is the culmination of man versus God, you see it happening in Armageddon. So stay tuned for that. I hope you liked this exposition, getting into James 4. I trust that you will like this video, share it with other people, that you'll subscribe to my channel, and you'll be hitting the notification bell and ready for the next video as we look more into that great war, that battle of Armageddon, and as Jesus returns.